In this video, I'm going to go through the questions in the practice finance interview from the last video, and I'm going to provide you with some advice and guidance on how best to answer them. So I'll start off with some general advice. And the first thing is always to research the company that you're going to be interviewing at. Today, there's absolutely no reason not to do that. You can quite easily do a Google search, or if you've seen their website address somewhere, that you can just type that in. You can look to see what they do, when they began, what areas of work they're interested in, and there's absolutely no reason not to do that today. Secondly, always be positive. Sometimes, even if you think the interview's not going well, try to keep a smile on your face. Don't sigh, grunt, or be sort of slow and sloppy with your answers, because it might be going bad for everyone and your interview might actually be quite good. So don't worry about that. And when you're answering your questions, always think about how you can benefit the employer, because really that's what they want to know. They want to know if you're going to be a good fit for them, if you're going to bring the right skills for them, and if you're going to be able to help them do more. Okay, so the last one is try not to lie. Now, it's really tempting sometimes if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer, just to sort of lie and just say, yes, you've used an application or you've done something. If you're not sure, the best strategy is always to try to ask for clarification or to ask for an example and see what experience or skill you have that matches that. Not everyone is going to be able to answer every single question. Even the most experienced finance person may stumble at some point of finance that they've never looked at or nobody ever looks at. So it's always best not to lie and just to ask for clarification. Okay, so the first question is, why do you want this job? This is an icebreaker question. It helps everyone ease into the interview. And I think pretty much every interview that I've sat or that I've given, this question comes up. The thing is to focus on why you want this job in terms of how you're going to benefit the employer. Like, I have a specific finance skill set that I want to use and utilize, and I think if I came and worked for you, I could do that for you and it will benefit you whilst I'm in that job as well. So you want to think of it always in terms of a win-win situation, and you don't want to focus exclusively on yourself. So you don't want to answer the question like, oh, I want this job because I've just come out of university and I saw this job and I've applied for it and I think I can do it. That's probably not the best answer. Question 2, is there a specific area of finance that interests you? So here you can be honest, like if there is something that interests you, if you're into auditing or if you're into financial modeling, you can say that. If you've just come out of university or some other type of study and you're not entirely sure, you can say that you're just looking for a general overview of finance and that in the future you're going to determine which part of finance interests you. If you've had a previous job and there was something that you were good at and that you wanted to continue, but maybe you're moving from a small firm or company to a larger one, again, that's a very valid answer that you can use. So question 3, can you describe some of the qualities that I am looking for in someone who will get this job? This is really about how you fit into the organization. So you can run through some of the standard qualities that they'll be looking for, something like hardworking, experienced, knowledgeable, has integrity, and then you can go into depth like something like a talented person who can bring real benefits to the company in terms of improving sales, customer care, or bringing cost savings. So question 4, how do you think the experience from your previous job would benefit you in this post? So if you've just graduated, then you need to talk a little bit about what you learned. So whether you were doing a degree or you were doing a diploma or something like that, you need to talk about any of the team building skills you did outside of education. You need to talk about any volunteer or charitable work that you did and how that matches up to their expectations of what they want someone who will be doing this job. And the best way to look at that is to see if there's a job description posted along with the job advert, or see if you can find someone else who's done something similar and ask them, and that way you can match your skills to what they're looking for. If you have previous job experience, then you need to talk a little bit more in detail about what it is that you can offer them. So what did you do in your previous job? What did you do really well? And give some real life examples. Question 5, what experience or skill do you hope to gain from this job? Again, looking through the job description, see areas that maybe you are not so good at or have had little experience in, and talk about those and how you're good at them, but you want to improve that area of your knowledge, skill set or experience. For For example, you could say that you've managed a small team and now you want to move up to managing a larger team. So that's something that's very good. It shows how you're progressing. So question 6, again, thinking about your past jobs, what do you think was the area that you excelled in the most? Don't say everything. You need to pick 1 or 2 examples, show why you're very good at it and how you used your skills and experience to improve the employer that you were working for. So did you improve sales? Did you improve a process? Or did you improve client care? What is it that you actually did and how did you achieve it? Question 7, and what was the area in which you struggled in? Well, this is a question that most people like to give a false negative to, like, I push my team too hard, or I'm a perfectionist, and most employers see through this. You see these sort of answers on pretty much every website on how to answer this type of question. Instead, think of something that needs improving, how you will improve it, and how that improvement will benefit the employer. So maybe there's something that you're not really that great at, but you could say something like you want to improve it through better training, or you can improve it through better experience on the job, and something like that. So don't give those sort of false negative answers. Okay, so question 8. Can you tell me about a problem you faced in your last job and how you resolved it? So again, this is just them looking at your skills in terms of problem solving. So this is another example-based question. And you need to think of a project or piece of work that you did really well and think backwards to why that project was needed. For example, you could say you were asked to create a report for a department, and when you try to do that, you find out that there's no information, the team hasn't been inputting into the system, there's no process. So then that was a problem that you faced, and how did you resolve it? Did you put a system in place? Did you speak to every staff? Or what about people who were not motivated? And if you said, this isn't my job, I'm not going to do it. Now, how did you overcome that problem to the point where you could create the report that you were asked to create? And question 9, it's always good to be able to resolve a problem, but what would you do if you were unable to meet a deadline? Now, this is going to happen to everyone in every job. There's going to be a deadline and you're going to end up missing it. So you need to talk about 2 things. The first thing is everything you're going to do to make sure that a deadline isn't missed. And that includes making sure that the deadline is reasonable in the first place. If a piece of work takes 4 days and you agree to a deadline of 2 days, you're going to miss it and it's pretty much going to be your fault. But sometimes, for example, you might have a good deadline, it's appropriate. It might be the day after tomorrow you're supposed to provide a report and you're going to get some information from John tomorrow. It turns out tomorrow John is off sick, so what are you going to do? No one else has that information. So once you arrive at that scenario, you need to say, well, who do I need to talk to in order to say, well, what can we produce, or can we actually extend that deadline? So it's really that simple. But a lot of people stumble on it because they want to say, I'm never going to miss a deadline, I'm so good. And in reality, in life, that doesn't happen. People do miss deadlines. Alright, so question 10. We use a custom finance application called OLAS. Do you have any experience with it? Have you ever used OLAS? Is OLAS real? Okay, so OLAS stands for Online Accounting System. Now, that's not really important. What's important here is the employer is trying to ask you a question that is deliberately going to be something that you've not heard of. Unless it was specifically mentioned in the job description, they might choose something that no one's ever heard of, and they want to see what your response will be. Will you lie and say, yes, I've used it and I have a lot of experience with it, and I found at first it was difficult and then I actually managed to make it work? And that's a bit of a fib and you might get caught out. Or is the candidate going to say something like, I've never heard of OLAS, could you tell me a little bit more about it? In which case they tell you it's an online accounting system. And at that point you can say, well, I've never used OLAS, but I have used similar accounting applications like Sage and Integra. So that's really what that question is about. So question 11. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other software applications you use specifically for finance? So here you just go through a list of the software that you have used. Now, this is going to be a pretty standard list depending on which section of finance you're looking to work for. Now, if you've never used any finance application, the best thing to do is to search on YouTube, and there's always someone who's done a training video on something. So if you've never used Sage, do something like Sage training in YouTube, and you'll come up with a series or a couple of videos, and you can at least watch those, and then before the interview, and then during the interview you can say at least you have some experience with it, or you've received some training on it, and they may ask you a few questions and you at least know what you're talking about. So you can talk about some in depth, and then you can just list some that are popular at the time, like Sage, Crystal Reports, Cognos, QuickBooks, and even PayPal if you want. Alright, so now questions 12, 13, 14 and 15, they were: what's the difference between accounts payable and accounts receivable? What's the difference between sales revenue and profit, and which one is the most important? What's the difference between the profit and loss account and the balance sheet? And can you describe a situation in which a company has high sales but is in financial trouble? Now, these 4 questions are all technical questions. I'm not going to answer them because that's not going to help you. A lot of times in finance and IT interviews, you will get technical questions, and they will be all across the board. So the best thing to do is you need to brush up on your technical knowledge. So for finance, you need to know about accounts payable, accounts receivable, balance sheets, what goes into the balance sheet, what the profit and loss account is, and all of those things. Now, if you've just come out of university or a course, that might still be fresh in your brain. If you have previous finance experience in a specific area, you might be lacking knowledge in another area. So you might just want to, pick up your old finance books and just go through some of it and see what you think is missing. Okay, so question 16, what do you think about companies that use loopholes and aggressive tax avoidance tactics to reduce their tax bills? So this isn't really about finance, it's more about current events. So right now there's a lot of discord about rich and wealthy people and companies taking advantage of tax loopholes, reducing their tax bills, whilst the standard person has to pay whatever rate of tax they have to pay. So for example, here in the UK, if you're in employment, your employer will actually deduct the tax before you get your paycheck. So there's absolutely no chance for you to do any type of aggressive tax avoidance, or even any type of tax avoidance. So is that really fair, and what does society think of it? So you really need to deconstruct that question. But should companies and individuals pay more tax than they legally have to, or should they try to reduce their tax bills by using aggressive tax avoidance techniques? And what happens when the public finds out? They're not going to be impressed, are they? And sometimes, especially if you've looked recently, there's a lot of violence, and a lot of companies' images get tarnished because they've not been paying what's perceived to be a fair rate of tax. They might be paying what they legally have to pay, but not what everyone else is thinking is fair. So you might be paying 20% as an employee in a company, while someone who's earning 10, 20 million, they're paying 15 or 14%. So how is that going to affect society? So for those type of questions, you really have to be looking at current events and seeing what's happening and what's a hot topic in finance. So question 17, when you get a new task, how do you go about completing it? There's no right answer to this question, but it generally revolves around correctly identifying the task at hand, creating a plan, identifying issues and roadblocks, gathering the resources needed, and executing your plan. And once you've executed it, you need to get feedback, and you need to take action on that feedback so that you know that you've done the task correctly. Question 18, you mentioned in your application that you have experience writing reports. Can you give me a little bit of detail about that? Now this is a question more about them picking something from your application and then just prodding a little bit further to see what you've actually done when you actually say you've done something. So you just have to write about what reports you've written, what application did you use, the level of report that it was. So for example, was it an internal report? Was it for your team? Was it for the CEO or a director? And any special techniques or processes that you used. Question 19, and after you've written these reports, do you just distribute them or do you present them in person? So here the question is about your written, verbal and people skills. Are you someone who just works in the shadows and sends off an email? Or are you someone that goes to meetings, presents your reports, and then tackles any problems and issues that you may face? Question 20. And what sort of feedback do the reports generate? So most reports lead to questions. Do you prepare for these beforehand and then answer them straight away? Or do you have systems in place to allow you to drill into the data right then in the meeting? So this is about how you handle feedback. And following on from that, question 23 is, how would you handle negative feedback? Now, although this sounds like a difficult question, because you think it's negative feedback, that must be bad, so how do I answer this question? And although it sounds difficult, you can turn it around and talk about the importance of the feedback loop. So that is how you use negative feedback to improve reports and processes to the benefit of your employer. So question 22. Which do you think you should put first, the client or our company? Now this is a philosophical question. There's no right answer. You need to talk about the importance of clients and how having a good client relationship is good for the company, which leads to a win-win situation for both the company and the client. So question 23. What do you think is the difference between a company behaving immorally and a company behaving illegally? If you've been following the finance profession for any period of time, you have heard about significant illegal and immoral activities. So things like clients being deceived, rogue traders losing billions on the stock markets, to banks mis-selling financial products and causing an entire economy to collapse. So you need to talk about how one, immorality leads to another, so how it can lead to how something small can lead to something large and something criminal. And that in the end, the benefits of such bad activity will be wiped out if the company loses its reputation, integrity, or is caught acting illegally or immorally. So think of all the big banks that have been around for 100 years or more, and all of a sudden they do something bad and they're gone. They just go bankrupt and you don't hear about them again. Okay, and leading on from that, and what would you do if a client, employee, or manager asked you to do something illegal? Okay, so this question is about whistleblowing, and that basically means that if you know something bad is happening in your company, you have to tell someone. So that is, you're going to be telling your manager, your team leader, or if there's a whistleblowing procedure, then you have to use that. For example, some offices and companies have a telephone helpline, or they will have a specific email address that you can send information to anonymously. If none of that is there and you know something illegal is happening, then you have to go to the police. Right, so question 26, we are an equal opportunity employer. What does that mean to you? So here in the West, so in the UK, in the USA, there's a lot of anti-discrimination legislation. So a disability discrimination legislation, a race relations act, and racial discrimination acts. So it's really about talking about taking an inclusive approach to treating everyone. So that's colleagues, suppliers, other people that you work with, and clients fairly and equally, regardless of what their background is or what their race or their gender is. Okay, so question 26. Can you tell me about a situation in which you have had to make a change to accommodate someone with a disability, and what steps you can take to help someone with a disability? So this question is sort of splitting into two parts. So what have you done in the past to help someone with a disability? And if you've not encountered that, what can you do in order to help someone with a disability? So again, this is another question where you have to give an example, or you have to come up with some changes that you can make. So for example, you could provide a brochure of a report in Braille if requested. You can ensure the company website meets accessibility guidelines. You can ensure something as simple as making sure that there is step-free access to the building. And if there are steps, that there is a process in place to deal with customers or people who need to get into the building who are in a wheelchair, for example. So question 27, do you think that being an environmentally friendly company is too expensive and companies should always put profits first? This is a newer question, but it's gaining importance. It's about social responsibility and being aware that companies and individuals don't operate in isolation. So everything a company can do can have a negative impact on the environment and on society as a whole. But the notion of being environmentally friendly as expensive, that's an outdated notion. And so companies today, they can be environmentally friendly, and it can in fact be to their benefit. So for example, a company could decide to go paperless. Now they may not be 100% paperless, but even if they can get to 80-90%, then not only is that good for the environment, because you're cutting down less trees, there's less CO2 emissions from trucks needing to carry paper around, but it can also reduce their paper costs, it can reduce printer, photocopier costs, and it can reduce energy costs as well. So that's a win-win. So it's a win for the environment and it's a win for the company, and it also makes the company look good socially as well. The question 28, if you were to get this job, how long do you think you would stay with us? Now this is a really difficult question, because on the one hand you want to say, I'm going to be here forever. You don't want to give them the impression that as soon as you get the job, you're going to leave. But then on the other hand, you want to show them that you're going to keep moving to better positions as you gain more experience and more skills. And sometimes that may mean leaving the company and joining someone else. So something like, I hope to stay a while. I'm really looking for an organization that would help me become the best version of me possible, and to provide challenges for me that are rewarded with career progression. So something like that can be quite a good answer. So question 29, can you tell me a couple of reasons that would make you want to leave? Here it depends on the company that you are interviewing with. If it's a small company, then be honest and say something like, once I fulfill my potential here, then I may consider moving on. But if it's a medium, large or prestigious company, then you want to emphasize that you wouldn't really leave unless their reputation was tarnished. So the last question was, do you have any questions for the interviewer? Now only ask questions if you have them, or if you think the interview was too short or it didn't go well and you want to really sort of extend it and maybe be a little bit more social with the interviewing panel. Otherwise, I wouldn't really recommend asking any questions. So I hope you found this useful. Join me in the next video where I will actually be showing you a book that is really a must read if you're into business and finance. And if you have any questions, then leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them as best as possible. If you liked this video, please like it, do subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you know when the next video is out. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.